Isaiah chapter 32, beginning in verse 1. It says, "Behold, a king shall reign in righteousness, and princes shall rule in judgment. And a man shall be as an hiding place from the wind, and a covert from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land. And the eyes of them that see shall not be dim, and the ears of them that hear shall hearken. The heart also of the rash shall understand knowledge, and the tongue of the stammerers shall be ready to speak plainly. The vile person shall be no more called liberal, nor the churl said to be bountiful. For the vile person will speak villainy, and his heart will work iniquity, to practice hypocrisy, and to utter error against the Lord, to make empty the soul of the hungry, and he will cause the drink of the thirsty to fail. The instruments also of the churl are evil. He deviseth wicked devices to destroy the poor with lying words, even when the needy speaketh right. But the liberal deviseth liberal things, and by liberal things shall he stand. Rise up, ye women that are at ease, hear my voice, ye careless daughters, give ear unto my speech. Many days and years shall be troubled, ye careless women, for the vintage shall fail, the gathering shall not come. Tremble, ye women that are at ease, be troubled, ye careless ones, strip you and make you bare, and gird sackcloth upon your loins. They shall lament for the teats, for the pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine. Upon the land of my people shall come up thorns and briars, upon all the houses of joy in the joyous city. Because the palaces shall be forsaken, the multitude of the city shall be left. The forts and towers shall be for dens forever, a joy of wild asses, a pasture of flocks. Until the Spirit be poured upon us from on high, and the wilderness be a fruitful field, and the fruitful field be counted for a forest. Then judgment shall dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness remain in the fruitful field. And the work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness quietness and assurance forever. And my people shall dwell in a peaceable habitation, and in sure dwellings, and in quiet resting places. When it shall hail, coming down on the forest, and the city shall be in a low place. Blessed are ye that sow beside all waters, that send forth thither the feet of the ox and the ass." So, going back up in verse 1, we're coming off of the chapters where we see Israel and Jerusalem, Judah, warned not to go down into Egypt, not to seek refuge in Egypt, but to seek refuge in God. And God says, well, this is what you'll get if you trust in me. This is what I will bring you. In these last few verses of chapter 31, it says in verses 8 and 9, "Then shall the Assyrian fall with the sword, not of a mighty man, and the sword not of a mean man shall devour him. But he shall flee from the sword, and his young men shall be discomfited, and he shall pass over to his stronghold for fear, and his princes shall be afraid of the ensign, saith the Lord, whose fire is in Zion, and his furnace in Jerusalem." So it says God's fire is in Zion, and his furnace in Jerusalem. And then it says, "Behold, a king shall reign in righteousness, and princes shall rule in judgment." And so this king that shall reign in righteousness is Jesus, and this is Jesus when he reigns in the millennial kingdom. It says, "And a man shall be as an hiding place from the wind, and as a covert from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land." So Jesus will be, he'll be the shelter from the wind, he'll be the covert from the tempest. We've had really bad storms in our part of the country. Fortunately, it missed us, and it didn't hit anybody near here, but it is unfortunate for those that did experience that. We pray for them, we offer them help, we offer them assistance. Some go physically, leave their own place to go down and help those that experience things like that. But here it says that Jesus, he's a king that shall reign in righteousness. And it says, "And a man shall be as a hiding place from the wind, and a covert from the tempest, the rivers of water in a dry place, and the shadow of a great rock in a weary land." He's the shelter from the storm. He's the drink when you need it, and he's the shelter and the shadow, the shade in the hot sun of the day. He provides all those things. And so in the millennial kingdom, things like these storms, these overwhelmingly hot uncomfortable days, overwhelmingly cold, freezing days. Those things we won't have to worry about. Those things he'll protect us from. God we've talked about this, in the imagery we get from the book of Isaiah, and this is the way I understand it. This may not be exactly the right way of thinking about it, but it's the way I understand it. When God allows all of these things to happen in the tribulation, when these things happen, I don't believe that he's directly saying, okay, meteorites fall. Okay, atmosphere split and do your thing. I don't think that's what he's doing. I think that he's already placed a curse on the earth from what we understand, from what we've been reading, and that was all the way back in the Garden of Eden when sin entered the earth. And he's holding it together. And he's exercising control over the physical universe. But when he begins to loosen his grip, that curse just spreads and spreads and spreads. And so I don't think he even has to directly will those things into being, directly will those judgments into existence. He's just loosening control and letting chaos just naturally take place. Because that's what exists when you let the devil rule. That's what exists when Satan is in charge. It's chaos and destruction. But when you have Jesus ruling on earth, exercising that control, he is tightening the grip. And that's very plain, because it says multiple times throughout the Bible, and it says especially in the book of Revelation, and you can look in chapter 12, that he will rule with a rod of iron. When he comes and he rules during the millennial kingdom, it's not going to be this idea that everybody is completely and 100% free to do absolutely and anything and everything that they want to do, and everything goes just absolutely and completely free, and God doesn't need to exert influence because everything's just wonderful. That's not how it is. He's ruling with a rod of iron. He's exercising control, both over people and, I believe, over the planet, the environment, the nature itself. So, he's going to re-exert that control after the tribulation. He's going to do that, and Ron's talked about this, and I don't think it can be underscored enough. I don't think it can be emphasized enough that when Jesus comes back to the earth, he's reclaiming the earth. Right now, God is allowing Satan a certain amount of leeway, a certain amount of authority over this earth. And that's why you see things the way they are. Whenever he comes back, he's taking that authority away from Satan and he's reclaiming it. That's what he's doing when the seals are being opened there at the seal judgments. What's happening is Jesus is opening, I believe, the title deed to the earth. And he's saying, the earth is mine, not yours, Satan. And it's time that I'm going to reclaim it. And that's when he comes back and he reclaims it. And so he allows those judgments to happen. He allows those things to occur. But it says here in verse 3, and the eyes of them that see shall not be dim, and the ears of them that hear shall hearken. And so this is what it'll be like in the millennial kingdom. The heart also of the rash shall understand knowledge. You get a person who's prone to anger, prone to act without thinking. Specifically, that's what that is. The heart also of the rash. When you think of somebody that's rash, you think of somebody that acts immediately. No thought, just action. And that's not what it is. It says, they shall understand knowledge, and the tongue of the stammerers, those who have trouble speaking, those who have trouble communicating, it says they shall be ready to speak plainly. And then I'm going to spend just a little bit of time on this verse. The vile person shall be no more called liberal, nor the churl said to be bountiful. And I don't think there's any time in history that we can understand what this verse means better than today. You have people who call themselves liberal. And growing up, I actually thought that liberal was a dirty word because of the kind of people that word is used to describe nowadays. Because it describes people who appear to be in favor, not just in favor of allowing people to do what they want, but in favor of saying that we must support people who want to do things that are sinful. We must not only support them, we must approve of it. We must support them both financially, emotionally, People who want to engage in homosexual marriage, which isn't really marriage. It might, legally, it has the legal definition of marriage, but that man's law does not compare to God's law. And so you have people that engage in things like that. You have people that want to take things from people and give them away to other people, and they call that liberal. So the word liberal, that's not what it really means, even though that's how a lot of people think of it today. You think of people who are really, this word here, vile, this vile person. The vile person shall no more be called liberal. And that's a lot of what our society's turned into. People will disguise themselves. They'll describe they'll disguise their sin and their evil, and they'll disguise that with the tint of liberalism. But that's not what they really are. They're actually vile. And so to be liberal really, truly, and plainly just means you want people to be free. You want freedom to abound. And I believe that, God gave us free will. God allows people to choose a path of sin, or to choose through acceptance of Jesus as their Savior, because we can't do it on our own, to choose a path of righteousness. You can choose either one of those paths. And that is a liberal decision by God. He's allowing people to be free. And so if you take the word and you look at it for what it really means, I would say that technically I am liberal in that I believe people should be free to make their own decisions. And some decisions I think the government messes up. Some things I don't think the government should allow people to wed, to call themselves married in homosexual relationships. But at the same time, I don't think it's my job to tell them that you can't do this in your home. Now, I'm not saying that we should approve of it, because it's not scriptural. I'm not saying the government should approve of it, because it's not scriptural. But when it comes down to it, God gave them the free will to sin. And if they're going to do it, they're going to do it. We should be ready and open with the gospel. We should be ready and open with Scripture to condemn sin. But there are things that the government's designed for. There are things that we're designed for. And then there are things that God says, this is mine, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I don't think it's our job to go and commit violence against people because they commit certain types of sin. That's not what we're to do. We're to give people the Scripture, we're to give them the truth, and we're to try to get them saved. Our job is not to speed along their pathway to hell. So, I fear, though, that a lot of people who call themselves liberal, that's exactly what they're doing, because they're making it appear that, well, this is all okay. This is all okay. They take it from beyond where we want you to be free to make your decisions to, well, we think that whatever decision you make is just great. And that's too far. That becomes where it's not liberal, even though they use that word. It's vile, because they're supporting sin. They're supporting something that goes against God's word. They're supporting something that goes against the very grain of His being, that should go against the very grain of our being once we become saved individuals that have the Holy Spirit dwelling in us. We should recognize those things as sin. We should recognize them to be off-putting, to be disturbing, to be disgusting, because that's what they are. They're not part of God's word. They're not in line with it. So, like I said, I don't think that there's ever been a time where we're in a better position to understand what that really means, because of the way that word liberal has been twisted and turned in our society over the past 250 years. And then also we have this term. It says, nor the churl said to be bountiful. Now, I looked up the word churl in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it's basically somebody who is a mean, impolite person. But it's got a connotation, and it would have had a connotation at the time that this was translated, with somebody who was a word we might use today, which is still a little bit archaic and old-fashioned, but we might call them a miser. Somebody who hoards money, somebody who's a penny pincher. A word today that most people would understand might be Scrooge. And I don't mean Scrooge in the sense that they don't like Christmas time. I mean Scrooge in the sense that it's just like, well, if I can just get another dollar here, get another 50 cents here, get another $100 here, just keep hoarding and hoarding and hoarding. That's what a churl is. And so it says, nor the churl said to be bountiful. They may have a lot of physical goods, but this churl, they're not going to be bountiful. They're not going to have abundance, because what they're going to have is judgment. They may have accumulated all these physical goods, all this wealth, all this money, but it's going to end up nothing, because the love of money is the root of all evil. And in order for Jesus' kingdom to flourish, I believe that love of money is going to go away. Because we know that the people who make it through the millennial kingdom alive, the ones who are not sacrificed, the ones who do not show up in heaven asking, when are you going to go back? When are you going to go back? When are you going to get vengeance for us? The ones who make it through and God allows them to survive through that, they're not going to care one bit about money. You know why? They won't be able to use it. They're going to go through a period of years where money's going to be absolutely meaningless to them. The whole economic system of the world, to be able to buy and sell, is going to be limited to people who've taken the mark of the beast. And they won't be able to participate in that. So money's not going to have any meaning to them whatsoever. What's going to mean something to them is God and His provision, because He's going to provide for them during that time in the tribulation period. So I never did think about that before studying this verse, but that you can see that that's just one more thing God's ironing out in the tribulation. He's trying to remove that love of money from people. And I think I don't know that there's any other way to accomplish it. I'm sure if there were, He'd try another way. But completely just not allowing people to use it that are His people and getting them to be reliant on Him, that's about the only way I can think of that you get people to get rid of that love of money. Now, it says in verse 6, for the vile person will speak villainy, and his heart will work iniquity, to practice hypocrisy, and to utter error against the Lord, to make empty the soul of the hungry, and he will cause the drink of the thirsty to fail. And so you're not going to be fooled in the tribulation period by who the vile person is. You're not going to mistake them for a liberal person. You're not going to mistake them for somebody who's misusing that word, because they're going to be evidently, immediately, apparently vile. It says in verse 7, the instruments also of the churl are evil. He deviseth wicked devices to destroy the poor with lying words, even when the needy speaketh right. And so this churl, he's going to be immediately recognizable. He's going to be taking money from the poor. He's going to be distributing that for his own needs, for his own wants. It says he deviseth wicked devices to destroy the poor with lying words. And that's what he'll do. You see, in our country today, and I don't want to get too political or get too wonky on tax law, because I'm not an expert on tax law myself. But it is true that the top 50% of earners pay something about like 80 to 90% of all federal taxes in this country. So the top 50% pay the most. And that makes sense because of the way our tax rates are structured. It's a progressive tax rate, meaning the more money you earn at certain different thresholds, the more money you earn over those thresholds, you get more taken off of each dollar you earn. So the people who are earning millions of dollars, they're getting a certain percentage taken off each of those dollars above however many hundred and some thousand dollars that they accumulate in income each year. And again, I'm not going to get political. I'm not going to tell you what I think about that. But what I will tell you is, even though that is the case, even though that is true, we know that the poorest of the poor, aren't suffering the hardest tax burden. In fact, they're getting a net benefit from the government because they're paying zero in taxes and they're receiving benefits. And I'm not going to tell you my opinions on that this morning either. We know that both of those things are true. We know the rich pay the most, and we know the poor pay nothing and they actually receive money. So you know what's happening to some of the money. However, you get to the people in the middle. Who shares the greatest burden Now, I don't mean the highest number. I mean the greatest burden, the hardest, most impact on their lives from taxes. You wouldn't call them poor per se, but it's the middle class. You wouldn't necessarily call them poor, but those are the people that have stuff to take that are hurt whenever you actually take it. Because they've got just enough to be about comfortable, and they're not so poor that they're starving or anything, but it does hurt more whenever you take stuff away from them. Okay? And so, the instruments also of the churl are evil. He deviseth wicked devices to destroy the poor with lying words, even when the needy speaketh right. And so whenever you're talking about this churl, he's devising wicked devices to destroy the poor. I'm not trying to say that this is literally what this verse is talking about, but if you think about the way that it works today in our system, this would be like somebody in the government who says, well, we want to increase taxes, but we're only going to increase them on the wealthy, and we're going to use this tax money for this, and this, and this. And then you go and you read the bill, and it's actually anybody who pays taxes, their taxes are getting increased. Again, I'm not going to tell you my opinions on any of this morning. There's no time for it, and it's not the appropriate place for it. But if you think about this, if somebody's so poor they don't have anything, you can't really steal from them. So my understanding is whenever this talking about the poor, it's talking about people that are maybe not upper middle class, but probably the lower middle class, the people who are just eking out. They're working, and they're eking out their living, but they don't have much. So they've got enough to steal, and that's just about all they got. So I think that in the tribulation period, you'll see this. You'll see this both in the one world government that's set up. I believe that there's probably going to be some kind of tax increase where they're going to talk about all these great things. Oh, well, if we come up with this one world system and everybody works together and we all come together and we all pool our resources and we do it through this one world taxation system, through this one world government, through this one world religion that we're all in agreement with, then I think everything's going to work out. This is how we're going to solve our problems. My guess is that's one of the ploys that the Antichrist is going to have when he comes in riding on that white horse as the first horseman. That you see in the book of Revelation. I don't know that for sure, but that's just kind of how I see it. But in the tribulation, there's going to come a point where this shield of liberal and this shield, of saying that this churl is, they're just rich, they're bountiful. They're going to be seen for what they are in the tribulation period. It won't be immediate, I don't believe. I think it'll probably happen somewhere around the 3.5 year mark. Probably somewhere around the coinciding of the destruction of the religious system that's holding up the Antichrist, as Ron's been going through on Sunday mornings talking about the mystery Babylon, the harlot, that religious system that props up the Antichrist. I think somewhere around the time that gets destroyed, the eyes of the world are going to be open. That's when they're going to start understanding what's happened, and that's when they're going to start experiencing all the pain and the suffering that those who choose to keep following God have been receiving for the first 3.5 years or thereabouts amount of time. That's the way I understand it. Now it says in verse 8 though, but the liberal deviseth liberal things. And again, like I said, when I was little, like really little, I thought liberal in and of itself was just a dirty word because of the type of people that use that word. Because as Christians, we ought to be able to see through those people. We ought to be able to see through them and know that they really truly are vile. But I didn't know the word vile when I was 4 years old. I knew the word liberal, and so that's how I saw it. But that's not what this is. This isn't a negative connotation here. This is what the word truly means. The liberal deviseth liberal things, and by liberal things shall he stand. And so this is a positive word here. This is a positive connotation. It's not negative. It's positive. So the people in the tribulation, the righteous people, the people who are following God, the people who are trusting in Him. They're trusting in the return of Jesus to come and end this period of time, this judgment. They're going to stand by liberal things. They're going to stand by righteous things. They're not going to be like the churl. They're not going to be like the vile person. So it says now in verse 9, here's a message to women. It says, "Rise up, you women that are at ease, hear my voice, ye careless daughters, give ear unto my speech. Many days and years shall ye be troubled, ye careless women, for the vintage shall fail, the gathering shall not come. Tremble, ye women that are at ease, be troubled, ye careless ones, strip you and make you bare, and gird sackcloth upon your loins." And so this is a warning to prepare, a warning to not be sedentary. And that's one of the things you see today. There are many women who, when they have, I don't know how many people in here ever had to use a washboard, but if somebody told you that you'd never be able to use a washing machine ever again for the rest of your life, and you'd have to wash all of your family's clothes on a washboard, would you be happy? No. Now, I'm not telling you that you're lazy because you said that. I don't think you are. I think you're using the resources that the economy, that God has allowed us to develop, that He's allowed the economy to grow, He's allowed people to discover things. You're using the resources at your capability, or at your disposal, because it's within your capability to do so. Here, though, this is talking about careless women, people who, these women that it's, they think, oh, well, somebody will take care of it. If this breaks, well, I can call so-and-so and they'll take care of it. If this messes up, well, we'll pay somebody to fix it. Or if this messes up, well, we'll have the maid do it. That kind of person is the kind of person I think that you might think about when you read these verses. But it says, "Tremble, ye women that are at ease," here in verse 11. "Be troubled, ye careless ones. Strip you and make you bare, and gird sackcloth upon your loins." He says, put on your mourning clothes, because you're going to need to mourn over what's going to happen. And so for another example of this kind of warning, let's look at, very quickly, look at Luke chapter 23. Jesus gives a warning here in Luke chapter 23. And this is actually while Jesus is carrying his cross. And this is after they've compelled Simon the Cyrenian to assist him in that. So in Luke chapter 23, and we'll just start in verse 27, it says, "And there followed him a great company of people, and of women which also bewailed and lamented him." He says, "But Jesus, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming in which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the paps which never gave suck. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us." And so that language there in verse 30 should be very familiar, because that's describing the time period of the tribulation. It's describing this time period where people are going to say to the rocks, just fall on us, end it. They go to hide in these caves because of all of the horrible things that are happening on the earth. They go to hide in these places that they think are safe. And they get there and they think, oh, wouldn't it just be so much better if this mountain were just to collapse right on me and just end it all for me, so we don't have to go through this worrying and suffering and heartache and pain and distress and discontentment. That's the time period it's talking about. And so in that same time period, Jesus says, the days are coming in which they shall say, Blessed are the barren and the wombs that never bear. And that's not something you would ever wish upon any woman today. It's not something you'd ever wish upon anyone to say, well, I just wish you were barren. That'd be a horrible thing to say to somebody. It's absolutely horrible. Because that's, we know that we're put on this earth to reproduce. We know we're put on this earth to unless you're a very specific person with a very specific calling from God, the general purpose for people is to make more people, make more followers of God. train them up in the way that they should go. That's what our general purpose is for just about every living human being. And so you'd never say to a woman, well, wouldn't it just be so much better if you were barren? You can't even imagine saying something like that. How horrible that would be, because it's just totally 100% against what God has laid out for us in this life. But there will come a time whenever things are so horrible on this earth, things are so pitifully just so much judgment, so much suffering, that people will say, blessed are the barren. It is a horrible time to be a human being. Blessed are the barren. That they don't have to go through the childbirth in this time of suffering, that they don't have to worry about trying to nurse a child in this time of suffering, that they don't have to worry about trying to raise a human being in this time. They're going to say it's a blessing. And so couple that with what's being said here. Tremble, ye women that are at ease, be troubled, ye careless ones, in verse 11. They ought to be trembling because it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy. You can think about how hard I can imagine about how hard it will be to be a man in the tribulation, trying to go out and secure food, trying to go out and secure nutrition, to secure shelter and safety. Even with the provision and blessings that God provides, it's not going to be easy for these people. It's not going to be a walk in the park. It's going to be a struggle, and there will be suffering in there. But I can't imagine, I can imagine those things. Maybe not well, but I can at least get some kind of faint inkling of what it might be like. I can't imagine what it would be like to be a woman trying to nurse a child during this time, trying to keep up whatever little shelter they have there for themselves, trying to watch the children each day, keep them out of trouble, keep them from worrying about the person from the government, the person from the one world system, the person from the Antichrist's fold, coming and finding them, to live each day. And really they shouldn't be worrying about that, because if they're one of those 144,000, God has chosen them to continue. But there's also a bunch of people that we know that get saved and die in the tribulation period. It's so many that John says you can't number them. So there are people that they're going to have to live through that, and they're going to die through it. And I can't imagine, how difficult that is going to be. But Isaiah here gives this warning in prophecy. He says in verse 12, they shall lament for the teats, for the pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine. And they're going to lament for them because those things aren't going to be in existence anymore. It's not going to be easy to secure milk. It's not going to be easy to secure vegetables, to secure fruit. It's not going to be easy to just go out and pick food off of a tree. We have these amazing things. We have these gigantic orchards, these gigantic mega farms in this country that just overproduce. We could feed the whole world multiple times over with just the food that's produced in this country. We have a logistics issue and a pricing issue that prevents, assuming that everything else were ironed out and you could get the food without it spoiling, we could feed everybody in the whole world with the food that we produce in this country multiple times over. I think we feed this country multiple times over each day, and you see the people that walk around every day, and you can tell they're being fed multiple times over. That's... It says in verse 13, upon the land of my people shall come up thorns and briars, yea, upon all the houses of joy in the joyous city. It's going to become desolate. Those fields are going to go away. It says thorns and briars are going to grow up. If you ever see any pictures or any imagery like some of these post-apocalyptic movies or anything that they make, you can, especially if you get a picture of this big cityscape, you can see the cities are all, even somewhere like New York City, which is today, it's a concrete jungle. You see this imagery of just how it, and you talk to people who know how plants grow and you know how they work. And if you ever look at a sidewalk in town, if somebody hasn't sprayed that or treated that in very long, the weeds start to grow up. It doesn't take that long. Even in a concrete jungle type environment, plants will grow. We learn that in our own parking lot each year, that those plants and weeds, those things are tenacious. And so you get these pictures of these cityscapes that are all grown over, these giant skyscrapers, that they just got plants growing all over them because they're abandoned. That's what it said. That's kind of like it is here. These fields are going to be abandoned. It says, upon all the houses of joy in the joyous city. Because the palaces shall be forsaken, the multitude of the city shall be left, the forts and towers shall be for dens forever, a joy of wild asses, a pasture of flocks. It says this is going to be so, everything's going to be abandoned. It's going to be horrible until the Spirit be poured upon us from on high. And the wilderness be a fruitful field, and the fruitful field be counted for a forest. It says until this point, until the Spirit be poured upon us from on high. And this is not talking about the pouring out of the Spirit on the day of Pentecost. This is talking about the Spirit being poured out upon us from on high when Jesus returns to establish his kingdom. Now, we're not going to go and read about it all today, but we know from we know from studying through the book of Zechariah, and we know from studying through the book of Revelation on Sunday mornings in the worship hour that the earth, when it goes through the tribulation, it's gonna be almost broken apart. God's gonna shake it so hard, everything on earth it's gonna look like a different planet, because the mountains and the hills are gonna separate from one another. Things are gonna happen. But we also know from our studies on the book of Zechariah, when Jesus comes back, that the land around Jerusalem, he says it's gonna be flat. It's going to be good for farming. It's going to be, and the river of life is going to flow from the temple. You get that imagery from the book of Ezekiel, and you see that mentioned and alluded to in other scriptures. And it's going to be a really wonderful place. It's going to be a productive place. It's going to be an easy place to live. It's going to be the exact opposite of what we're talking about. It's you plant something and it grows. So. That's what it's going to be like when Jesus comes back, when the Spirit is poured upon us from on high. It says, then judgment shall dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness remain in the fruitful field. The judgment's going to be in the wilderness, and we'll get to this. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail whenever we get to chapter 34, but we've discussed this multiple times about Isaiah chapter 34. You see that in Idumea, we're not going to read it this morning because of the time, but in Idumea, which is also called Edom, that place, it's a wilderness, it's a desert. Mount Seir, we've talked about Mount Seir before, this just desertous mountain range with, it's not really hospitable, but for some reason people decided they would live there, and Esau decided that's where he'd make his nation, and that's where he made it. So this place, there's going to be this, it's like a burning tar pit. And again, you can read this in verse 34, or not verse, but chapter 34, of Isaiah. So we'll be there in a couple weeks, Lord willing. But, it's just this burning tar pit that just continues to burn and burn in the millennial kingdom. Not during the tribulation period, but during the millennial kingdom. And so it's like this type of hell. Kind of like how we read about Gehenna, Tophet, the Valley of Hinnom. It's like this picture that gives you a little glimpse of what hell would be like. And so from what I can understand, when I read chapter 34 of the book of Isaiah, God just puts this place here in Edom. He just makes this place. And it's this place where it's a place of judgment. And it exists throughout the millennial kingdom, And it serves as a reminder. It serves as, and again, I said Jesus would rule with a rod of iron. It serves as a literal picture of what hell is going to be, of what it will be for the people who sin, of what it will be for the people who defy God, people who are not saved, people who do not accept Jesus as their Savior, people who do not follow Him. And, that's the way I understand it. So when it says here, judgment shall dwell in the wilderness, it won't be in the field, but it will still be there. You'll still know about its existence. The millennial kingdom is not heaven. It's not the eternal kingdom. This is before the great white throne judgment. This is before the final judgment exists. And so judgment's still going to continue throughout the millennial kingdom. But it has its place. It's not going to be in Jerusalem. It's not going to be in the Valley of Hinnom. It's not going to be in Gehenna. It's going to be in this, I think, in this place in Edom, myself. But it's not going to be in this working land that they have. It says in verse 17, "The work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness quietness and assurance forever. And my people shall dwell in a peaceable habitation, and in sure dwellings, and in quiet resting places. When it shall hail coming down on the forest, and the city shall be low in a low place." It says, "Blessed are ye that sow beside all the waters, that send forth thither the feet of the ox and the ass." And so that reminds me of Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." You know, there's a reason why that language is used, because, you know, it's this idea that you have, and again, as Christians, you know, and not as religious Jews, it's not something that we as easily grasp and understand, because again, and I'm going to keep saying this over the years, we as Christians are not tied to the land. We don't have a connection to any patch of dirt on the earth. It's not, our citizenship is in heaven, and that's it. But God's chosen people of Israel, God set a specific piece of land apart for them. And so, you know, like it or not, they're bound to it. They're connected to it. They're covenanted with it. And so all this, the imagery of the land, it's easier for people who grew up in agriculture and farming to grasp, I think. But this idea of being beside the still waters, you know, and this idea of, you know, sowing beside the waters, you know, to understand what that means, to understand that you have fertile ground, good ground, understand you have blessed ground, and that's what it's going to be in the millennial kingdom. That's something that's a little bit harder for some of us to grasp. It's not impossible, because I'm sitting here explaining it to you right now, standing here explaining it to you right now. But, and I don't have the best grasp of it. But this is something that's really going to mean something, especially to the people in the millennium, or in the tribulation, who, when they read this, they're going to see, look what's waiting for us on the other side. You know, we're looking at this thinking, well, this is going to be really horrible, what's going to happen, but gee, aren't we glad we're not going to have to be here as Christians? We're either going to be raptured out, or we're going to already be there in heaven after we pass away from this world. We don't have to worry about this. You know, if you're saved here this morning, you don't have to worry about it, but there are people that will. And this book is going to extend into that time period, and they're going to have it, I believe. And they're going to read this, and oh my goodness, the encouragement. The pouring out of the Spirit that's going to be on these people in the hardest time that will ever be for people to exist on this earth. God will see them through. You know, and he says, I've got this waiting for you on the other end. Just hold on a little longer. You know, and yes, life, I'm not saying life is easy today. I'm not saying it's without pains and troubles and heartaches and worries, but what we have, you know, we have so much more blessings. We have so much more than what these people are going to have to contend with. And so, you know, that it ought to be encouraging for us, because in humanity's lowest point, God's still there. You know, and in our lowest point as Christians, He's still here. So that is chapter 32 this morning. Any really quick comments or questions?